Hi there. Glad that you could come on back as we continue our series looking at the fruit of the Spirit. Today I was thinking about drive-thrus. I was thinking about how drive-thrus are actually slowing down. The average time that it takes to go through a drive-thru in the US in 2019 was actually 4.5 minutes. That was the average per kind of the top like 10 fast food joints. It takes about 4.5 minutes from the moment that you show up at the speaker and you make your order to when they give you your food. And Dunkin' Donuts was the fastest. Dunkin' Donuts had a time of 3.5 minutes, and the slowest was Chick-fil-A, and they had a time of almost 5.5 minutes. Can you imagine 5.5 minutes to get your food? That's crazy. Now, you would think that maybe it's because they're getting worse at what they do, but the truth is that's not actually why they're slowing down. They're slowing down because we're getting more demanding. So the food, we're demanding that the food is actually of a better quality. You know what I mean? Like a little bit of a higher quality. We're demanding that the food is cooked better. And on top of that, they're also providing more and more and more and more and more options, and to give us sort of a chance to kind of get some fancier food. You know what I mean? And so a lot of these fast food joints now, they've got a larger menu, and that makes it more difficult to get food out the door really, really quickly. Do you remember before, at a lot of restaurants, there would actually be burgers and French fries and all that kind of stuff all pre-made, just waiting for people to come up to the door. They'd be sitting underneath warming lights, and when you order, they would just sort of put it together and it would go out the door. But now we kind of expect that our food isn't made until we order it. But the problem is that we want our food to be fast, but we don't want it to be started until we order it. You see the catch-22, right? And it's funny because places like McDonald's are spending millions of dollars in order to get faster and faster and faster in the drive-thru. Recently, McDonald's bought a company called Dynamic Yield for $300 million. Now, Dynamic Yield is actually an AI company, and McDonald's is betting that artificial intelligence is what's actually going to help them get faster when it comes to ordering, that the computers are going to be able to think and anticipate, and that's going to speed up their drive-through times because they know the speed of their drive-throughs is crucial to their success and to their profit margins. People are not willing to wait for their food. It's as simple as that. They're just not going to wait. And it worked because they got, you ready for it? $300 million, 20 seconds faster on their drive-through times after using these procedures and these products. 20 seconds faster for their food. Now let's review those average speeds there, right? Because I think it's important. The average speed at McDonald's was 4.5 minutes. To put that into perspective, you would have just enough time to listen to Finally Free by Rend Collective after you made your order. So you would make your order and then you would listen to I am finally, oh, right? That would all happen. By the time that's done, you get your order of food for your whole family in the time it takes to sing one song. That's crazy. Your whole family. And that wasn't fast enough, so they spent $300 million in order to knock 20 seconds off the time. I don't know about you, but at the Ben household, it takes a lot longer than 4.5 seconds to make supper here. We have a lot of people to feed. It's a big table. It does not take 4.5 seconds from the time we start making supper to the time that supper is on the table. But that's kind of where we're at as far as our patience level is concerned. And then I was thinking about growing up. Do you guys remember the Sears catalog? Remember the Sears catalog? Now, I grew up in a small town called Chapleau in Northern Ontario, and we didn't have a whole lot of stores. We had a Stedman's, and then we had this sort of local store called the Village Shops that was just sort of run by a family in town. And we had the Sears catalog. And it would come to the house and we would go through it. And of course, the most exciting one was the wish book that would come before Christmas. And you would go through and you would circle all of the stuff that you want, everything that you were hoping for, right? I mean, that was kind of how it went. You knew what you wanted for Christmas. This one that's right here is actually from the summer that I turned 10 years old. This one came out that summer. So I was 10 years old when this came to my house, and I started looking through it to sort of see what I wanted to buy from it. But you would have to call a number, or you would have to call a number to place your order. There was like an order form at the back of the book, and you could fill it out, and each item had a little number, and you write the little number in the little blocks, right? So you could call a number, or we had this depot in town where you could go and somebody there would put your order in for you, and then you had to wait. Then you had to wait weeks for that item to come in. It wasn't going to come in just a few seconds. It was going to take weeks for it to come in. And you would wait, and you would wait, and you would wait, and you would wait. And then when it finally came in, when the item finally arrived, you didn't even get the item. The item didn't get shipped to your house. All you got at your house was you got a little slip that told you that it was waiting for you at the Sears Depot, and you had to go in there and wait in line there and hand in your slip, and then they would go get your item, and then they would bring it out, and hopefully it fit, because if it didn't fit, now you had to send it back, and it was a whole thing, right? Now, think about how life is now. Now we have Amazon delivery. We have Amazon Prime. You can get stuff the next day. Sometimes you can even get it that day. I mean, that's crazy, right? And then on top of it, Amazon is actually starting to toy with the idea of delivering products by drone. They're going to ship a drone. You'll have like a little thing that you put out on your lawn, and it's like a little homing beacon, and the drone will come like something out of a science fiction Terminator movie and come down onto your front lawn and drop your package, whatever it was that you just had to have, and then it'll fly away. That's nuts. That is so crazy that we can get stuff from all over the world that quickly. And I think back to when I was sitting here waiting for this thing for weeks and weeks and weeks for it to come. That's how impatient we're becoming. That's kind of how our world is. Everything right now, all the time. Now, today we're going to talk about this idea of patience. Okay? And patience isn't just about waiting, though. It's not just about waiting for stuff to come, right? That's not the only definition of patience. It's not even just about waiting in lines and stuff like that. It actually goes even bigger. Webster says that the definition of the word patience is bearing pains or trials calmly or without complaint, manifesting forbearance under provocation or strain, or being steadfast despite opposition, difficulty, or adversity. You see, patience is this ability sometimes to endure. It's this ability to endure difficult situations, even if those difficult situations are going on for a long time. Kind of like COVID. Like patience is like this ability to put up with COVID, even though it's taking forever to finally come to an end, right? Or patience is the ability to put up with difficult people. I don't know about you. Have you ever worked somewhere with people who drove you crazy? People who would like just get on your last nerve like you couldn't handle it. People who just drive you nuts. And patience is that ability to be kind, to be generous, to be gracious, even when somebody is driving you insane. Or the ability to just not lose your marbles and just start screaming at somebody, right? Patience is the ability to offer grace and kindness in difficult situations, right? Like even when everything is going really wrong and you're starting to get stressed out, that you don't start lashing out at everybody. Sometimes I do that. Sometimes like when I'm really having a hard time, when things are really not going how I want them to, it's hard for me sometimes to treat others graciously and kindly. I get snappy, right? Because I'm not the most patient guy. Patience is the ability to wait for the things that matter in your life, the ability to actually not just seek out instant gratification, but actually wait for the things that are going to be worth waiting for. Patience is the ability to work consistently and constantly towards the goals that you have in life and to not give up because it's taking a long time. So the question that I want to do first is like, what does the Bible say about patience, right? What is the Bible? Well, we know it's one of the fruit of the Spirit. We've been looking at that for the last couple weeks, right? Fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience. So we know that when God is at work in us and when we allow God's Holy Spirit to begin to actually make a difference in our lives, we know that as we do that, we're going to develop more and more and more patience. But it goes beyond that. Paul talks in Colossians 3 about this. He says this. He says, look, therefore, as God's choice, holy and loved, put on compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Be tolerant with each other, and if someone has a complaint against anyone, forgive each other, as the Lord forgave you, so also forgive each other. And over all these things put on love, which is the bond of unity. The peace of Christ must control your hearts, a peace to which you were called in one body, and be thankful people. This is what we're called to be as followers of Jesus, right? This idea that we put on these things. We begin to walk in this way. We've talked about that during the Desert series. This idea that being a follower of Jesus is there's this like way that we can walk, this way we can be in the world. And when we walk in that way, when you and I walk in that way, it actually begins to have this kind of powerful effect on us, and it can actually make a difference in the world around us. It's this way that's marked by compassion, it's marked by kindness, it's marked by humility, gentleness, patience, forgiveness, and love. That's what it means to be a follower of Jesus. This is how we're supposed to live. And we're supposed to live like that because that's what the one that we are following is like. That's what Jesus is like. That's what God is like. In the book of Nehemiah, Nehemiah says this about God. He says, God, you are a forgiving God, gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in love. That's that idea of being slow to anger is a part of who God is. God is so patient with our rebellion. He's so patient when we don't do what he's called us to do, when we argue with him, when we fight back, when we start saying like, no, I'm going to do it my way. I'm not going to do it your way. And then when we don't do it his way, and then when life starts to go rough a little bit and we find ourselves having to cry out to God and ask God for help, then God is still patient with us. He's not like, nah, it's too bad. You're on your own now. He shows us his patience and his kindness. And so that's why we're called to be like that. Because patience, think about what patience does. Patience creates space. It creates space for other people to learn and to grow and to change. When somebody is driving you nuts, when somebody can be really difficult, or when somebody is fighting back against you, or these kinds of things, when you and I are able to be patient with that person, we actually create some room. When God is patient with us, when we are fighting back in rebellion, that actually creates space for us to learn and to grow and to realize that God's way actually makes more sense than our way. That's what patience does. If God reacted right away at the beginning, if God was that knee-jerk kind of aggressive reaction, if God wasn't patient, then there'd be no space for us to grow and to learn and to become the people that Jesus is calling us to be. This is why it's this idea of long suffering, right? It's this idea that something's going to take a little bit of time. And it's not just that, like, think about what Peter says. Peter says that the Lord isn't slow to keep his promise. So he's talking about how Jesus promised to come back again. That Jesus would come back and he would finally sort of reach the climax of what he had started on the cross, that finally things would be the way that God always intended them to be, that he would completely and utterly annihilate this idea of brokenness and sin in the world. And so, like, the early Christians, and now even sometimes ourselves, we're like, man, why is God not coming back yet? Why is Jesus not come back yet? Why is he still letting evil win in the world? Why are things still so rough, so hard? Like, come on, God, why don't you just fix it? And Peter's saying, look, he isn't slow to keep that promise, as some might think of slowness, but he is patient towards you, not wanting anyone to perish, but all to change their hearts and their lives. It's not about him being slow. It's not about him taking too long. It's because he's patient, because he wants us to have that space, to have that time, to have that opportunity to change and to grow. And so we want to be able to offer that same thing to other people. How do we offer that to other people? How do we create space for those people around us who drive us nuts? How do we create space for those people at the grocery store? How do we create space for people to learn and to grow? We do that by becoming more patient. So how do we do that? How do we develop patience? How do we become more patient? Now, the beauty of all of this, because we can't pick up patience. It's not like we can just go to a store and grab some patience off the shelves. You know what I mean? It's not like it's this muscle that you can go to the gym and you work out this patience muscle, like you're doing like patience curls, and then once you finally do enough of them, now you have like a really strong patience muscle. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. We're going to talk a little bit about why going to the gym helps patience, but that's a little bit later. But the good news is this. The good news is that current psychological research, current psychology, actually has shown that patience is something that you can actually develop. You can get better at it. In a sense, you can develop more patience. It's not kind of a fixed thing, right? Like that's good news. Like, think about it. Some people tend to think about patience as if it's like, if you're born a good singer, right, or you're born really good at sports, you're born something else. It's not like that. It's not something like some people are born patient and some people aren't. Some people maybe are a little better at it than others, but patience, it turns out, is definitely something that you can get better at, right? It's not a case that you're either a patient person or you're not. You can actually get better at being a patient person. So what are some of the things we do? Well, the first is this. Practice good mental health hygiene. And what I mean by that, this is where that gym thing comes in. We know that if we get the right amount of sleep, we know that if we eat healthy, and we know that if we exercise regularly, our mental health is better. And it turns out that the same is true for patience. It turns out that if you exercise more regularly and you meditate and you actually like eat healthy and you get enough sleep, it turns out that you actually can become more patient. That it's easier to be patient when you're doing that. So not only are these things good for our mental health, but they're actually really good for how patient we can be. The more stressed out we are, the less sleep that we're getting, the more we eat like crap, it's harder and harder to be patient. So it actually does make a difference. The second one is this. Use your imagination. Now, I know this sounds kind of crazy. Now, what I'm not saying is like some people are like, oh yeah, that's what I do. You know, when I'm at the supermarket and the line is long and I'm getting bored, I just daydream and pretend I'm somewhere else. That's not what I mean. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is practice the skill of visualizing the outcome, of visualizing what will happen if you're patient, and visualize what will happen if you're not patient. I mean, this is kind of what we do anyways, but the more we're conscious of it, the more we actually start to do it intentionally, the more effective it can become. Like, think about this. Let's say like you go to the pizza shop and you order a pizza, and you get there and you order it, and they're going to make it just for you, and they put that pizza in the oven, and you watch the slowest conveyor belt ever take that pizza through the pizza oven, and it comes out the other side, and the guy gets the big huge spatula, scoops it up, puts it in the box, and gives it to you. Now you know that you have to wait before you can eat that pizza. But you don't want to wait, right? You get it back in the car, and you know that back home people are waiting to eat the pizza, but that pizza is sitting on the passenger seat and it smells so good, and that car is so small, and the pizza smell is just all in there, and you know that if you lift that up and you grab a slice of pizza that fresh out of the pizza oven, all the skin on the roof of your mouth is coming down, your taste buds are going to be totally cooked, and then nothing's going to taste right for a couple of days. So you know you got to be patient. Not only do you got to be patient to get home because it's rude to eat the pizza in the car before you get back to your house, and also you know that you're going to bugger up your mouth if you don't. Well, what you're doing when you're trying to talk yourself out of eating the pizza is you are visualizing. You are imagining what it would be like to eat that pizza without waiting. Or better yet, you imagine what it would be like. You visualize what it's going to be like when you eat that pizza at just the right temperature with your friends who are waiting back home for the pizza. And because of that, you're able to be more patient when you need to be. And the truth is that, like, visualizing, it sounds really cheesy, kind of sounds goofy, but researchers have found that visualizing an activity that you already know how to do, something that you do, like, so for example, if you learn how to play the piano, and you, instead of actually practicing a piece, you actually visualize yourself playing the piece, research have found that it's actually very, very effective. And it's not quite the same thing as actually practicing it, but pretty close. And the more you visualize it, you actually make some muscle memory, you make some new connections in your brain, and you will actually get better at playing that piece, for example. Even if you played it 3 out of 4 times and one time you visualized it, you will actually get better at it than if you just practiced it 3 times and then didn't visualize it. So actually visualizing, things like that with patience will actually make a difference in our lives. This other thing that they do is this thing called intentional optimism. Right? Intentional optimism. And intentional optimism is this idea, kind of like with the pizza. So when I was talking about visualizing the pizza, I was talking about how we visualize like the negative. So we tend to visualize like what will happen, I'll burn my mouth, I'll burn my tongue, etc. Right? That's good. But negatives don't tend to give us like a really good reward. What gives us a better reward is actually positives. Right? And so what this theory suggests is that if you visualize a positive outcome for whatever it is that's causing you to struggle and causing you to be impatient, and you visualize a positive outcome, what's going to happen if I actually am able to wait? Right? What will the positive outcome be? Because the more we can do that, the better off we are. So in a sense, it's almost like put yourself in the shoes of your future self. Right? If I wait, what positive benefit is that going to be to me in 20 minutes or 20 days or however long you got to wait? Because when we do that, that gives our present self some strength. It gives our present self the ability to be patient. Another thing we can do is this, and I like this one. This one made me laugh. If you want more patience, pretend that you have lots of patience. That's all you got to do. Just pretend that you have lots of patience. If you're struggling with it, no problem. Just pretend that you have it, right? It turns out that believing that you've already got a ton of patience actually helps you be more patient. Now, what I mean by that is this idea that some people think that like patience is an exhaustible thing, right? Like you only have X amount of patience points for the day, and at some point you're going to run out of them. And once you run out of them, like, oh no, then that's it. I'm going to blow my top. I'm not going to be patient anymore. And what the research suggests is that that's not actually true. And if you believe that patience is this inexhaustible source that you have within you, right? Like it's just this energy source that just never runs out. If you believe that and you actually tell yourself that, you'll find that you're able to be more patient. Isn't that crazy? So essentially, like fake it till you make it, in this case, actually turns out to be true. If you believe you can't run out of patience, then you don't end up worrying about running out of patience, which I think is absolutely really, really cool. One of the next things is this: learn to reframe. We've talked about this at Vox a lot. We tell ourselves stories all day long. We're always telling ourselves stories. And we play like a little movie in our head very often. Like a lot of people, for example, have you ever gotten in an argument with somebody and then you play that argument over and over and over and you think of different things you could have said? Or worse yet, have you ever been worried about an argument? Have you ever known that you have to have like a hard conversation with somebody? And so you play that conversation, you play it out in your mind as if it's already happened, and you think about all the different ways that you're going to do it. Think about going to the grocery store. So you go into the grocery store and you come to the lineup and it's a huge lineup. And you're waiting and you look at your watch and you realize this is going to be a while. And then that person at the front of the line decides they want to have a conversation about some coupon or something. And you see them start rooting around in their purse or in their bag, and you're like, oh no, this is just going to take forever. We're never going to get out of here, right? Well, what's happening? As you get more and more angry, you're starting to tell yourself a story about what's happening. And part of that story is usually things like, oh, I'm going to be late. I'm going to be up. You start getting upset. You start freaking out. And the problem is that story that you're telling yourself might not actually be accurate. Here's why. It turns out, and I didn't know this until this past week. I hadn't really connected the two, but it turns out that patience, or more importantly, impatience, is actually kind of like a fight or flight kind of thing. Impatience tends to fire out of our amygdala. And our amygdala is that part of our body that does the fight or flight. It's the part of the body that gets the adrenaline going, gets the heart rate up so that we've got blood and energy ready to go to our legs and arms so we can run away. It's the part of the body that was designed to be able to react when there was an actual serious threat. And it wasn't bad back in the day. Like, it wasn't bad when the threats were things like, man-eating lions or something like that. The problem is that our amygdala isn't very good at determining what constitutes a credible threat now. Do you know what I mean? Because what happens is, like, now when we're sitting in line and that person pulls out those coupons and we now know this is going to be a long line, do you know what actually happens? Your amygdala kicks your fight or flight response into gear a little bit. Your amygdala goes, oh no, person with a coupon book. That's the threat. What we got to do? It's your brain starts reacting like the woman at the front of the row, the line that has the coupon book is actually some kind of ravenous mountain lion or something like that. And so now all this stuff is going on. Your heart rate goes up. You start pumping adrenaline into your veins, and all this stuff is happening. Why? Because you got to wait a little bit. Do you see what's happening? So this story is happening before you've even started to consciously think about what's going on, process what's going on. And the most important thing that we can do is actually step back from this a little bit and actually examine the perspective that we're taking on this. Examine the story that our response system is telling us, that we're under threat, we're under threat, we're under attack, we're under attack. We got to do something here. And you can step back and go, wait. What is actually going on? And we start to process the thing. So step back is the first thing you need to do. And then you got to start asking yourself, you know what I mean? You got to start asking yourself, like, okay, what's going on? If you're going nuts in line, you start telling yourself a new story. It's like, wait, I don't have anywhere to be. I don't have anywhere to be. It's going to be all right. And maybe you do have somewhere to be. Maybe you're going to be late. So you can ask yourself, okay, is this actually a life and death situation here? Is this actually something that my fight or flight response needs to be going off on? Or am I just going to be a little bit late? Maybe I'm going to be 5 minutes late. It's not really that big a deal. And is it worth getting this worked up over? You can't find a parking spot. Isn't it interesting if you can't find a parking spot at Christmas or something like that, you start getting so angry and upset? You're going to find a spot eventually. It's not really that big a deal. You might wait 20 minutes. You might wait half an hour. I bet you wasted more than half an hour on Facebook just this morning and didn't even realize you did it. You got to ask yourself, is this really a big deal? And then the thing we have to do is we have to take all this stuff and then we have to tie it to the larger story of our lives. This is what I mean by that. Sometimes if you've got kids can try your patience, right? Sometimes kids can drive you a little bit nuts. And especially if you've got a child who's going through one of those phases in life where they just got to push every boundary. They got to push back against you at any chance they get. They're just trying to feel themselves out. That can drive you nuts. And so when that happens, you can get really upset about it. You can start to lose your mind, or you can step back and you start trying to get perspective on the situation. I would almost encourage you to take one more step back and ask yourself, okay, wait. What do I believe about how important being a parent is? What is it about being a parent that I actually think matters? What is it about being a parent that I actually love? What is it about being a parent to this particular child that you love? Because when you step back that far, you realize, okay, wait. All right. I want to help my kid grow to be the best kid they can be. I want to help my kid grow to be the person that Jesus would be if Jesus was them. The best version of themselves. And so when we do that, when we step back that far and we're like, okay, that's what I want. Now we're able to kind of step back into the situation and go, okay, if that's what I want, if that's actually something that's important to me, then I'm going to need to learn how to be patient in this situation because I want to be able to give them some space to grow and figure it out. And you see how that kind of changes it, because now it's not about the actual little thing that drove you nuts. In our house, it's the garage door. Our garage door is always open, nonstop. Every time I close the garage door, I come back and it magically went up. In fact, I'm starting to think that somehow it's on some sort of like magic spring, even though the door opener's broken, that somehow when I put it down, it goes boom, right back up again. Drives me crazy. But you know what? It doesn't matter. Now, if all I'm thinking about is the fact that that garage door is always open, I'm going to go nuts. But when I step back and I realize, all right, it's not really that big a deal. But then when I step back even further and I'm like, you know what? I love being a parent. I love being a part of this crazy household that's here. And it's really not a big deal in the scheme of things. And I want to create enough space. And so I need to find some patience. So there's enough room here for all of us to learn and to grow and to become who Jesus called us to be. Think about it in the grocery store. So in the grocery store is a good example too, because I hate lineups. They drive me nuts. But one of the things that I often find myself doing is I will step back and say, okay, wait. One of my core values is the belief that every person that I meet bears this image of God within them, that they have this intrinsic value. Whether they are like a CEO of some, Fortune 500 company or the cashier at just a local grocery store, they have that same integral value. And I believe that because they were created by God and because they bear that image of God. And so there's this large story that I'm telling myself that I want to treat every person that I meet like that. And so when I find myself really frustrated about something, when I step back, I'm like, okay, wait. How am I going to be able to treat them the way I believe they deserve to be treated if I allow myself to just get carried away in wave after wave of impatience? Really, the question that I'm often asking myself is, how do I respond like Jesus in this situation? I mean, it's almost back to what would Jesus do? But it's more this idea of how would Jesus be? Right? And that's why this love, the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, all these things, they're characteristics of how Jesus would have us be in the world. And if I'm supposed to be patient in the world, if I'm supposed to have this belief system, then I'm going to have to figure that out. Because if I lose my marbles, then I'm not staying true to that core value. And that takes us to the next one, and this is this. Train, don't try. Some of you maybe didn't get a chance, but some of you had to work and were essential workers all the way through the quarantine. I ended up stuck in this house for 2 months. I've said a few times, but I think I left the house maybe 20 hours total in 2 months. And I did not do what some of the recommendations were when it came to physical exercise. So by the time those 2 months were done, I was pretty, there's a lot of atrophy going on in my muscles. And if I would have tried to just sort of get up after sitting on a couch for 2 months, right, and then gone out and tried to run a marathon, I'm dying of a heart attack in 5 seconds flat. Nobody would ever try to do that. Nobody signs up for a marathon, a full marathon, who hasn't actually trained for that marathon. That would be nuts. That's how you die. And what you do is you start going out there, and when we did the Tough Mudder, you'd go out and you run a kilometer and think, oh my goodness, I'm going to die. And then after a little while, I could run 2, then 3, then 10, then 15, and then 20. And you start realizing okay, I can do it, right? But it takes a while, and it takes commitment, and it takes endurance, and it takes intentionality. It's not something that just happens overnight. Look you lived your whole life to get to the place that you are right now. It took your whole life to develop the habits that you've developed. It's taken your whole life to develop the character that you have. And the things that you and I might want to change about that character, that's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time. One of the reasons at Vox we talk about life being a journey is because that's the best example of what it is. It's this daily walk that we're going on, and some days are good days and other days aren't so good days. And at Vox we're trying to do it in a way that we're walking beside each other as well, and maybe some days I can help you and some days you can help me. But journeys take time. Journeys aren't all one thing. And when we talk about the fruit of the Spirit, what I don't want ever to happen is that you listen to one of these messages and walk away with this heavy weight on your shoulders, like, oh, it's another thing that I got to try harder at. That's not what I'm trying to do. I actually believe that the way that Jesus taught us to live life is the best way to live life. I actually believe that if we live with more love, more joy, more peace, and more patience, and onwards in our lives, it's a better way to live. And so I want that for you, but I also believe that it's going to take time. Like I said at the beginning, good news, patience is something you can actually develop. But I also want to check that with it's okay if it takes a while. It's okay if it's not something that happens overnight. And so I want to leave us with the why a little bit. Okay? So we talked about there's the reality that there are so many situations in life that we have to be patient. So many situations in life that can drive us crazy. And then there's this reality that the scriptures over and over and over again, they actually command us to be patient, encourage us to be patient. It's this thing that is supposed to be a mark of somebody who's following Jesus, is this idea of patience. But why? Well, one of the things that's kind of neat is that researchers have found, one of the reasons I talk about this is I absolutely love when modern science, when psychology, for example, does research on some of these things and finds out that, hey, guess what? Turns out Jesus was right. You know what I mean? And so what happens is it turns out that people who are patient are actually less depressed than people who are not patient. On one hand, it makes sense, but on the other hand, it's a bit surprising, right? That's a very interesting statistic. And it turns out that people who are patient are also more hopeful and they are also more satisfied with their lives. Patient people report being more satisfied with life than impatient people. There was this patient training study that was done a few years ago, which was really fascinating. They took a bunch of different principles and actual little exercises that you can do to actually develop your patience, right? And so they took a whole bunch of people and they trained them, put them through this little course, gave them a bunch of little tasks to do to actually develop, intentionally every day, develop their patience. They did it for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. That's it. And after 2 weeks, I want to get this right. After 2 weeks, participants reported feeling more patient towards trying people in their lives. So more patient towards those annoying people in their lives, feeling less depressed, and experiencing higher levels of positive emotions in just 2 weeks. Could you imagine if I told you, if you're struggling with depression and that kind of thing right now, and I told you, I said, you know what, there's something you can take that in 2 weeks is going to make you feel less depressed, more hopeful, and have more positive emotions. You'd be like, yeah, sign me up. What's the name of the drug? Can I get it from my doctor, et cetera, et cetera. And if I was like, patience, practice patience. Isn't that crazy? You'd be like, yeah, whatever, that's nuts. But seriously, that's all it takes to have, to be able to have more patience towards trying people in our lives, to be less depressed, to be more hopeful, and to have more positive emotions in our lives is to actually develop our patience muscle. My goodness, that's something that I think I want to do. And it's not just about being happy in the Bible. Here's the reality. Jesus told the disciples when he left that he was coming back again. We talk all the time about this idea that when Jesus, at Vox, we talk about how Jesus came to teach us how life was always supposed to be lived. He came to model that life for us. And then we talk about how he died and rose again to make it possible for us to live that life. We believe, now the fancy term is atonement, but we believe that when Jesus died, walked into that grave, and then 3 days later walked out again, something changed fundamentally in the universe. Now the Bible uses fancy terms like death was defeated and sin was broken and this kind of stuff, but practically speaking, it means that we don't have to stay broken. It means that God, by his Holy Spirit, actually strengthens us to live the life he called us to. And it means that this idea of life that ends at death doesn't actually have to be that anymore. That there is this eternal life. And we believe that the life that Jesus taught us and modeled for us and died and rose again to make possible is one that starts now, but one that also then continues on for all eternity with him. And he said that he would come back. And when he came back, he would complete what he started. And so things would finally be as God always intended them to be. That there's no more brokenness, no more hurt, no more evil, no more injustice in the world. And that picture that gets painted in the scriptures is beautiful. And so it can get so frustrating when we're stuck in the middle of the brokenness, when we watch humans do such horrible things to each other. When we see injustice everywhere we look, it can be so incredibly difficult for us. It can be so tough when we see all of that. And so sometimes it makes us want to reach out. It makes us want to actually try, wish that God was coming back. And even so, like in the Bible, John prays, even so, come Lord Jesus. And that was happening with a lot of the Christians at the time. And so James actually says to the Christians, oh no, my TV's not working. Here, we're going to try to fix that here. There we go. So James says this to the Christians. James says, therefore, brothers and sisters, you must be patient as you wait for the coming of the Lord. Consider the farmer who waits patiently for the coming of the rain in the fall and the spring, looking forward to the precious fruit of the earth. You also must wait patiently, strengthening your resolve, because the coming of the Lord is near. As you and I strengthen our patience, as we deepen our patience, not only does it help us in the everyday little bits of life, but it also helps with this, because patience ultimately comes down to this idea of trust. This idea that God has a plan and a purpose. This idea that God actually cares more about us than maybe we even understand, right? I think that patience is totally a skill worth practicing, especially when you look at the reality that it, like I said, is less depression, more hopeful, and more positive feelings. It's this another example of how we find our way to the rich and full and abundant life that Jesus has promised us. That this is what life was created to be. That life was created to be more loving, more joyful, more peaceful. And life was created to be more patient. I was thinking about today too, that it goes beyond even just all of that sort of stuff, but that when you and I are able to learn the skill of patience, it lets us actually engage in life more. Do you know what I mean? It lets us be present more in the moment, because so often the reason that we're impatient is because we're not in that moment that we're in right there. We're actually thinking about the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And we can't even enjoy what we're doing because we're so focused on the next thing. And patience allows us to learn that skill of waiting, to learn that skill of just being where we are, being present in that moment, enjoying that moment. I was thinking about how impatience actually steals life away from us. That when you and I like think about it, so you're in a good mood, you go to the grocery store, you go try to find everything, you get to that lineup, it slows down, the lady pops out her coupon book and starts arguing with the cashier, and all of a sudden you realize that you're going to be there for a while, and everything was going really well and you were happy, and then suddenly that joy, that happy, it gets stolen away from you because you're so frustrated because you can't wait long anymore for this thing. Do you know what I mean? Life gets stolen from us in those moments, and I think, man, that is so sad. I don't want my life stolen from me. I don't want my joy stolen from me because I let my impatience build. I let my amygdala kick my fight or flight response into gear. And suddenly I'm angry and upset. I don't want my ability to enjoy the life that God has given me now in this moment to be stolen away because of things that I'm hoping for in the future. I don't want my enjoyment or my ability to engage in what's going on now in this world be stolen because I let myself get impatient waiting for God to act, waiting for God to show up, waiting for God to bring justice and to finally get rid of some of the brokenness and evil that exists in the world. I don't want to lose the good that I could be experiencing because of that. I don't want to miss out on opportunities to be more loving, to be more gracious, to be more kind towards people around me because I've let my impatience just drown all of that out. So I don't know about you, but I'm working on my patience. I'm working on practicing it. I'm working on being more present. I'm working on visualizing what I actually want to come about in life. I'm working on those things. I'm working on trying to practice some better mental health hygiene so that patience becomes easier. I'm working on these things, and I hope you will too. Because as we go through this series on the fruit of the Spirit, I really believe that this way of following Jesus, this way of living life, is by far the best way to live life. More loving, more peaceful, more joyful, more peaceful, more patient. And next week, I think we're looking at kindness. So join us for that. Thanks. God bless. And we'll see you later.